Okay, right, we'll make a start. Prynhawn da i chi gyd, croeso mawr I chi, diolch yn fawr am ddod. Mae'n amser prysur o'r flwyddyn. Peter Thomas ydw I, a dwi'n bennaeth sgiliau a gallu digidol yn y Canolfan. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you ever so much for coming. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a very busy time of year. My name is Peter Thomas. I'm Head of Digital Skills and Capability here in CDPS. We have the chat facility enabled, so please dwedwch siwmai yn y chat, dwedwch wrthym pwy ydych chi a o ble ydych chi'n dod, a pharhau ddefnyddio'r sgwrs drwy draw am sylwadau a cwestiynau. Please defnyddiwch Gymraeg neu Saesneg. So I'm saying please use the chat. Please use it in Welsh or English. Tell us who you are, say hello, where you're from, and please use it throughout for comments and questions. We'll be presenting in English today, but happy to take questions in Welsh. We have our translator here as well, so please feel free to use both languages. Today's webinar is the second of three that focuses on attracting, recruiting, and retaining talented people in public services in Wales, and in particular all about digital roles. So our previous webinar was all about attracting candidates, and our blog post with the links to the recording and the resources will be available, and I'm hoping we can be able to put the link to that in the chat any second now. So today we're focusing on the recruitment process, and that's the plan for today's webinar. I'm just here to introduce things today, and I'm going to be handing over very quickly to Lauren, who's our expert, and will be sharing her experiences from the recruitment process that we use here in CDPS. Lauren is then going to hand over to Sheenagh, our special guest today. Sheenagh's been asked to come along to not so much defend, but explain how HR can change processes. So I know last time in our previous webinar, we had lots of comments about how processes are fixed and in place and they need to be followed and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, Sheenagh's going to overthrow all of that because Sheenagh's led with Chris, who's here in the background as well from NPT, Chief Digital Officer, and their digital recruitment campaign recently that's been really successful. So Sheenagh's going to wrap up with what they've done and how they approach things there, which is a breath of fresh air to all those involved. And we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end too. So that's it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Lauren immediately.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Pete. So for those of you who couldn't make it to the Attract webinar, I just wanted to reintroduce myself. As you can see, my name's Lauren Power, and I work for a company called Futureheads. Myself and my director, Andrew Rogers, have been partnered with CDPS since April this year. And I was initially brought in to help reduce CDPS's contractor reliance by owning their permanent recruitment process as their internal talent partner. And yeah, as Pete said, you know, just to cover off the kind of main focus of my part in this webinar, I'll be giving you an overview of CDPS's interview process, sharing what works for us and how we've taken steps towards being more inclusive and accessible. And I'll also cover off how we sift CVs and how we undergo kind of interview management and offer management as well. And I'd also like to point out that all of the resources that I talk about in this webinar will be available on our website and following blog posts as well for you to copy and adapt to your own processes if you wish. So next slide, if that's okay, thanks, Lise. So to start, I wanted to provide some data regarding job seekers' behaviour that I really feel kind of sets the scene and demonstrates why we have implemented these different procedures. So a positive candidate experience makes the candidate 38% more likely to accept a job offer from a company. 8 in 10 candidates would be discouraged from applying for a role if the organisation had failed to feed back on a previous application. 46% of candidates believe that their time is not respected by employers during interviews, and 37% of job seekers feel intimidated when there are 2 or more interviews present. So those are just some interesting statistics that really kind of corroborate why we should be focusing on improving our interview and offer management as well. So a part of the process that I think is often overlooked is the importance of job control and job ownership. There are many steps that come between the role requirement being raised and then the candidate actually being appointed. And a lot of people often play really different roles within this process. And this can often cause kind of confusion and delay, as there isn't one person taking ownership of the role and progressing it through those necessary steps. And one way that we've learned to deal with this in CDPS is with our recruitment timeline Kanban board. So as you can see, we've identified the steps that our roles need to take in order to take a role from that job description creation portion straight through to the candidate onboarding stage. And we create kind of individual cards for each role that are moved along this board as each process is completed. And I then present this board at the senior leadership team meetings twice a week, which helps keep myself accountable and others accountable for their part in this process. And it's also an opportunity for any concerns to be raised and any blockers to be identified. You know, for example, when we first joined CDPS, the job translation process could take up to 2 weeks, which clearly was slowing down the recruitment process. And this was raised because of this board, and we put processes in place to ensure that the job description was sent for translation with enough time to account for this delay. And now with our the hiring of our internal translator, you know, this period has actually been cut down to a maximum of 1 week during busy periods. So, you know, this board is really simple, but it's a really effective way of, you know, remaining in control of that job throughout the process as well. So moving on to how we sift CVs. So CDPS's advertisement tranche lasts for 2 weeks. This ensures enough time for candidates to apply to the role and for candidate outreach to take place, and also make sure that we can work at pace. So once that advertisement tranche is closed, we then move on to the sift stage of that process. And our sift process consists of a pre-arranged interview panel made up of 2 to 3 people, depending on the seniority of the role. And we also aim to get a mix of genders and ethnicities on this panel as well, if we're able to. And the sift panel then review each CV and cover letter, scoring the application between 1 and 3 in the essential criteria that we've identified. And it's really important that your sift criteria is honest to your job specification as well. So we tend to use the who you are portion of our job descriptions to outline what the sift criteria will be. This way, the candidate's cover letter should aid you in pulling out that experience from their application. And by using this process, we're also ensuring that candidates are judged against the same criteria consistently, and that the most relevant candidates are then invited to interview. So from the point of advertisement to offer stage, the process for CDPS typically lasts around 1 month. This includes the 2-week advertisement tranche, and then the 1 to 2 week interview sort of process and interview stages. And it's important that this pace is then upheld, because candidates will feel like their time is being respected as well. And I would also say that feedback on all candidates should be provided at this stage. So if a candidate is a no, the hiring manager should put their reasonings why onto this form, and then constructive feedback should be shared with the candidate, as it ensures a positive sort of candidate experience right from the start. And one of the most important steps within the recruitment process is obviously the interview stage. So ahead of the interview process, you need to make sure that you're asking every applicant if they have any access requirements. So making any required adjustments will ensure applicants are not unfairly disadvantaged and have a fair chance of showcasing their skills and knowledge for the role. And if anything, the pandemic has also taught us that video calls can be really effective. So consider if a face-to-face interview is really necessary. And by this point, you should have found suitable candidates who have skills and knowledge that you feel will add real value to your organisation. And it's important to remember that an interview is also an opportunity for you to sell your business and leave every candidate wanting to work with you. And this also may be your first time meeting a future colleague. So obviously remaining kind of warm and engaging is always key during this stage as well. And from an accessibility standpoint, supplying the questions prior to the interview and keeping your interview process down to one stage, if possible, has proven to be really successful for CDPS. You know, not only does it ensure that all candidates feel comfortable and prepared going into the interviews, but it also ensures that we're keeping pace within a fast-moving market and also being respectful of candidates' time as well. And it's a really good idea to make sure that the list of kind of accessibility adjustments are available to candidates. And I'd also reconsider any kind of interview tests as well within this process. So, you know, consider if they are necessary or if it's possible to, you know, assess the applicant's suitability in a more accessible way. So if it is necessary, just ensure that they don't place candidates with disabilities at a disadvantage as well. So, you know, for example, any timed written tests could disadvantage dyslexic applicants. And we also use interview packs that remind interviewers of the important accessibility points, as well as a full scoring system for each of the preset questions. And the use of this scoring system and preset questions does ensure that there's parity across all of the interviews that we're conducting. And we also encourage interviewers to keep notes on this pack, which is then compiled into constructive feedback for candidates who then may not be successful. And, you know, I've done my best to try and present this on a PowerPoint slide, but again, the full version will be available for you as a resource on the website if you'd like to take this and kind of use it in your own interview process as well. Next slide, if that's good, thank you. And I know that providing these interview questions can be a fairly new concept. So I just wanted to provide some feedback from a candidate who recently went through the process, who gave me permission to share their thoughts. So they said, having the questions provided before the interview was great. I felt prepared and confident to put my best foot forward. Not only did it give me time to digest the information, but I felt like the organisation was on my side and supporting me to do my best. So I feel this feedback really speaks for itself. It's the idea that you want to help candidates to bring their best self to interview, and it's not a chance to try and trip them up or put them under pressure. You know, I've also had candidates who are neurodiverse comment that having the interview questions provided to them made them more comfortable to then go on and ask for other adjustments to be made to the process, as it's kind of showing that you're flexible and really happy to accommodate people as well. Thank you. And finally, the offer stage. This can definitely be one of the trickier stages to manage, but there are ways to ensure that you get the offer across the line without too much back and forth between yourself and the candidate. It's important to have regular touch points throughout the interview process. Ensure that you're discussing the candidate's salary expectations. You know, if you're restricted within a salary banding, be upfront with this from the start so that when the offer does come through, there shouldn't be a huge gap between what you're able to offer and the candidate's salary expectations if you've managed this throughout. And there really shouldn't be any new information for the candidates as well when the offer comes out. We've actually learned from past mistakes with this, and we now provide details on our pension contributions and benefits information on our job descriptions, so that these candidates are getting the information right from the very start of that recruitment process. So yeah, there just really should be no new information coming out in that offer pack when you're sending it out. And obviously, if you're lucky enough to have a reserved list from the interviews that you've conducted, then it's important to manage this correctly. Give them constructive feedback, be honest about why they weren't appointed, but explain why you would love to stay in contact for any future roles as well. And it's also really important to stick to the kind of set timescales that you've set out and provide feedback for all of the candidates to ensure that that best candidate experience is upheld as well. So yeah, this is the process that currently works for us at CDPS. If you would like any more information, please feel free to get in touch via my CDPS email address that was provided at the start. Yeah, now I'll pass you over to Sheenagh for her part.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. That was really interesting, and there's some really good points there that I'm sure myself and my colleagues will take away. So just to explain, I'm Sheenagh Rees. I'm the Head of People and Organisational Development at Neath Talbot Council. Also on the call today is Chris Owen, who is our Chief Digital Officer. So if there are any more technical questions, Chris might want to jump on. I'm also really pleased that I can see two of my colleagues from Neath Talbot are on the call. So Swetha and Lisa from our recruitment task force are on the call. And I'm going to use the word we a lot. When I say we, it's probably Lisa or Swetha who have actually done the work. So I should clarify that. So welcome both. Right, so Pete has asked me to join the session today just to explain a little bit about the approach that we've taken at Neath Talbot. I should say at the outset, there's no rocket science around what we've done. We've put in place what I think are fairly simple actions. And I also know from talking to other HR colleagues across Wales that a lot of these actions have been replicated across Wales. So I'm not claiming that we're doing anything really special here, but Pete thought it was of interest. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes just taking you through what we have tried to do. So when we talk about recruitment strategies, it's really important that we don't see recruitment as a standalone part of the employment process. So recruitment sits alongside lots of other things that are really important. As well as thinking about how we're recruiting people in Neath Talbot, we're also thinking about how we retain them. We're thinking about our reward and recognition strategies, our talent management, how we engage people, how we motivate people. We recently launched our strategic workforce plan, and we spent about a year actually developing that plan. So we spent a lot of time talking to employees, talking to our trade unions, talking to managers, and really establishing what the key priorities were in terms of workforce. Along with lots of other employers across Wales, across the UK, it was very clear that how we recruit people, both in the short term and the longer term, is a really key issue for us. We all know that there are massive recruitment challenges for employers at the moment, and in some sectors it's more difficult than others. So Elise, if you wouldn't mind the next slide, please. Thank you. So back at the end of 2021, we established what we've called a recruitment task force. So we called it a task force because we wanted to give the idea that there was some energy around this. We've pulled together lots of key people within the council and externally to the council. So I've referred to Swetha and Lisa, the recruitment specialists. We have put in place some additional support to the HR team. So Swetha and Lisa come with a wealth of recruitment experience. The HR team has spent over a decade basically downsizing our organisation. So recruitment hasn't been a big issue for us. Recruitment hasn't been something that we've had to particularly think about how we do it, be strategic around it, or develop our skill sets in it. We're now in a different place, and Cyhoeddus and Lisa have been recruited to add to that skills mix. And I think that's really important. It's a really important point for us to make sure we've got the right people in place around the recruitment task force. What we've also pulled together in the task force are recruiting managers. So recruiting managers of hard to fill jobs. We've included our employability team within the council, DWP sit on the task force, local college, university. So we've really tried to pull together lots of key stakeholders so we can get a focus on how we are recruiting people in Neath Talbot. So there are some short-term actions that they're thinking about, so filling vacant jobs now, but also longer-term actions linked at succession planning. So as well as our strategic workforce plan, we're also asking all of our managers to put together a succession plan for their service. We've wrapped lots of support around that, so they're not doing it in isolation. But the succession plans will give us really good intelligence. So corporately, we can plan key activities that are going to support succession planning in the longer term. So next slide, please, Elise. Thank you. So in terms of the recruitment task force, there are a number of key principles that we've applied. I think Lauren gave some really good evidence around why an applicant-centred approach is really important. And that also requires a change of mindset. So I think, you know, we've spent a number of years thinking of applicants as people who will be lucky to have a job in local government, who will be lucky to work in the council. Actually, we're having to change our mindset and actually think we've got to compete for these people now. And we need to apply that change of mindset to every stage in the recruitment process. And again, I think Lauren you know, talked about the process at CDPS and the different things that you've tried to do at every stage of the process to make sure that you're really thinking about how the applicant will feel going through those stages of the process. It's important to us to get the right expertise. So as well as having recruitment specialists on board in the recruitment task force, we've brought in marketing expertise. We've developed our recruitment website. So that's an action that we took fairly early on. So we actually engaged a marketing company to look at our website, to look at how we are actually marketing ourselves. We've got a brand now around our recruitment, so Team NPT is our brand. We've tried to make sure that the website looks inclusive, and to make sure that people understand that we are available for recruitment. So again, we've gone through a decade of austerity where we've been not recruiting on the open market. So we've had all sorts of recruitment restrictions in place. They're now not there. So we need to make sure people actually know that we are a place that is recruiting. A key principle for us, and I think this is something that Pete was referring to, is that one size doesn't need to fit all in terms of our recruitment processes. And we'll come on to how we've tried to amend some of our processes specifically for digital jobs. But as an example, we've looked at how applicants actually apply for jobs across the council. We've amended that for specific jobs. So for example, for home care jobs, we don't require applicants to write reams of paper. We have a tick box application form, and that seems to be something that is more appropriate and more attractive to applicants for those jobs. That's something we're trying to apply across the board. We have got the additional resources in terms of Lisa and Cyhoeddus. So I should say that when you're trying to apply very bespoke processes within recruitment, it is resource intensive. So that's just one caution that I would raise. You need to think, if you're going to have bespoke processes, you need to have the right resources in order to be able to do that. The other principle that we've applied is that we're going to fail to succeed. So we're going to try things out in terms of recruitment. They're not all going to be successful, but that's okay. The key is to not keep repeating things that fail. So we're trying to be really careful in terms of our recruitment work, task force meetings, is actually to review what we've been doing and to assess whether it's been successful or not. So getting good metrics around your recruitment processes is really important. So you can see where are the best websites to advertise, where's the best media, etc., etc. That's really important. So next slide, please. Okay. It's slowly loading on my screen anyway. Right, so in terms of what we've actually been doing in terms of the task force, this slide breaks down the key areas. So the first thing was, how do candidates actually find us? So I've mentioned the website. That was really important that we revamped the website. But we've also put in place some more traditional ways of linking in with candidates. So we've actually gone a bit old school for some jobs. In the old days, the card in the newsagent's window is actually something that we've tried again with certain jobs. We're trying to make sure that we're reaching all parts of the community. So we're thinking about the digitally excluded, as well as those who you know, can easily find us via LinkedIn. But that's been a really key area for us, making sure that we're working out where our candidates will look for us for each category of job. We've also thought quite a lot about what we can offer as an employer, and I'll come on to a slide that Chris put together for the digital jobs. But getting your employer offer right is really important. And again, that offer isn't necessarily going to be the same for every job. So again, I'm going to refer to home care. For home care jobs, the things they're interested in are, do we supply a uniform? Will they get mileage? Will they get training? That's really important for home care jobs, and we specify that. For our digital jobs, then it's more about the career pathway and the development. So it's really important that you think about what your candidate is looking for and that you specify that really, you know, up front. Thinking about the candidate journey, I think Lauren has covered that really nicely. But we have turned our approach on its head. So it's no longer about the recruiting manager and how easy the recruiting manager finds the process. That is important too. But the most important thing is about the candidate themselves. So we have introduced a recruitment platform which enables candidates, for instance, to go in and pick their own interview time. And that's really cut down on candidates having to ring up and say, oh, I can't do that time, can I change? Disruption to interview panels and all that sort of stuff. So it's actually a win-win, but applicants seem to really like it. How was it for you? It's really important that we actually check in with applicants to find out what they think of our process. So that's something that we're pretty active about doing. So we have a survey that we send out to job applicants to actually see how they find our recruitment process. And then the final point is that, of course, this doesn't all end with a job offer and a start date. Actually, it's just the start of an employment journey. So when we're thinking about recruitment, the next session is about retention, and onboarding and induction is really important when it comes to retention. So that's a really important part of this. So that's all just as very general background in terms of what we've done in relation to recruitment. there's about 80 actions that we've had underway in relation to the recruitment task force. So this is just a very broad summary. If anyone wants any more detail on exactly what we've done, I'll be more than happy to provide that to you. But if we could move to the next slide. So this is getting into what we've done in relation to digital. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of background to what Chris has been doing in terms of the digital service, because I think it's really important then in terms of the successful recruitment. So Chris joined us last year in Neath Talbot, and one of the first things that Chris did was actually review the digital service, review the structure that he had in place, and create a very streamlined structure with very clear career pathways, so all based on the DDaT framework. And if there are any questions around that, I'm sure Chris will be very happy to answer them. But having a very clear structure and a very clear pathway with jobs that are meaningful to the people who are going to be applying for them is actually really important. That gives you something very clear to be able to give your candidates, and they can see, oh, I can see how this job fits into the structure, and I can also see where I could end up in the future. And that's really important, that candidates get an idea of not just the job that they're going into, but also thinking about their longer term career planning as well. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. And so this is just an example of one of the teams within the 4 strands that Chris has created. So I'm not going to go into any detail of that. I can see there are questions in the chat for Chris, so I'm sure he'll pick those up. So next slide, please, Elise. Right, so then in terms of how we sought to recruit to all the jobs that Chris created, so a number were filled from within the existing workforce. That left us with 28 vacancies. So what we worked with Chris to do was to create a specific part of our recruitment website for DDaT jobs. So you can see that on it's my left-hand side of the screen. You can see it's a screenshot of our website. And when candidates go into one of those 4 squares, then they get more information about that particular team, and they can drill down into the vacant jobs that are available. Chris also worked with us to clearly set out the candidate offer. So what are we offering to our candidates? And that is really important in terms of thinking about what's our unique selling point. There's a lot of evidence at the moment that candidates are typically applying for 3 or 4 jobs at any one time, and unusually following through on all of those processes. So I've seen firsthand examples recently of where job offers have been accepted, and then subsequently those candidates have returned to say, actually, I've just accepted another job with somebody else. So we have to be so extremely competitive at the moment. In terms of the process for applying for the jobs, this is where we were able to be quite adaptable in terms of our HR processes. So for most candidates, we ask them to submit an application form, but there is evidence that in terms of digital jobs, if you require applicants to complete an application form, actually most candidates will say, no, I'm not interested. So what we enabled applicants to do for this particular process was attach a CV to the application form and just provide basic contact details on the application form itself. And that seems to have been a really significant factor in terms of increasing the number of applications that we've received. I know one of the other issues that you talked about in your last session was in relation to job evaluation and a frustration around perhaps job evaluation processes being seen as a blocker in terms of the recruitment process. What we've done with Chris is work together in terms of establishing his structure and making sure that the salary points that we've assigned to jobs is going to match the market as far as we are able to. I'm not here to defend particularly our equal pay processes, because there is a very good reason why we have job evaluation, and there are very good reasons why we want to make sure we have equality pay and grading structures. But that's not to say that there isn't anything that we can do around pay. So working together, Chris sat down with our job analyst and made sure that she properly understood every job that he was establishing within his structure, that she understood the links between the jobs as well, so how they related to each other. And if there was anything that she didn't understand, she was able to get that information from Chris. So she had a really good understanding of what he was trying to achieve. Chris was able to share with the job analyst then what his expected pay points were. And she was able to tell him then what he would need to do in terms of that job to achieve that pay point. So it was very much a partnership to get to where we needed to get to. If you just move on to the next slide, please, Elise. So in terms of our outcomes to date, so we had 28 vacancies, 15 posts have been advertised. Of those, one was re-advertised. We've successfully appointed to the 15 that have been advertised so far. And of those, 10 of our appointments have been made externally to the council. So I think it's fair to say that Chris is certainly really pleased with how our recruitment process has worked so far. We've got a number of jobs still to recruit to, and I know that Chris was telling me that some of them are going to be perhaps more of a challenge, so we'll see where we get to with the next jobs that we need to advertise. So final slide, please, Elise. So this is really my key message. I think the reason that we have been quite successful in terms of recruiting to our digital services jobs has been the partnership working. So both the broader partnership working across the recruitment task force and pulling in all the key people and the key expertise, but also the partnership between recruiting manager and HR. If they're both working in isolation, it is just not going to work. But I think coming together and having shared outcomes means that there is a much better prospect of success. So that's all I'm going to say today. I hope that's at all useful, and happy to take any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sheenagh. Much appreciated. Thank you, Lauren, for your section earlier as well. And I'm looking through the chat. It seems to be mainly me talking away there. We've had a question from Dave Milner. Chris has answered about mapping all the roles to the DDaT capability framework, and they have indeed all been mapped. And Chris has been open and honest about having to amalgamate certain roles just because of the size of the organisation. And not being as big as some UK government departments with lots of money. And Chris's comment about rewriting all the JDs and such like and aligning to the DDaT framework was quite an undertaking. But I suppose Sheenagh's hit the nail on the head at the end there. It's become a successful campaign. It did take time and effort, but you've ultimately got the staff that you needed now in the positions that they needed to be, with clear prospects for a career ahead of them. Fab. Okay, so I'm happy to take any questions. We have lots of people here in the webinar, so please type away frantically. I'm not sure you can react and put hands up at the moment. I know we had some trouble with the chat box not being around right at the beginning, but everything's up and running now. But please feel free to ask us any questions. Any comments from any of the other panelists? Anything else you want to add while we're waiting?
Just just to reiterate, I think, Pete, what Sheenagh was saying, partnership has been a massive part of the success of this piece in Neath Talbot. Sheenagh and her team have been fantastic in, really supporting us to get to where we need to be here. As you just mentioned, though, rewriting all those job descriptions and person specifications was a massive piece of work. And I think part of the ability for us to attract new people into the organization has been as a result of us advertising those modern fit for purpose roles. Without those, if we were putting out the legacy job descriptions and person specs that we had previously, I don't think we would have been as successful as we have been. So to almost go back to brass tacks, to unpick everything, to look at the strategic vision for the service, where we're trying to take it, and then to create those roles that map to that to help pull it in the right direction has been absolutely fundamental, really. But it is, there's a real jigsaw of pieces that have to come together. The only other thing I would say is, and I know this sounds obvious, but I know not everyone does this. It's making sure that you're in the right channels for the people who are looking for jobs. So putting something out on your website and just hoping people will flock to it isn't going to be the way it works. This is a highly congested area, highly congested market. People are having job offers left, right, and centre, even to the point where you've offered them roles, they've been offered other roles then on top of it, and they've got to pick and choose. So what is making your organisation stand out? How are you getting these jobs in the spaces that they're looking, be it through LinkedIn, be it through Twitter, so other social media channels, etc. Creating those simple little job cards, which was on one of the slides Sheenagh shared earlier, about we have head of product or head of delivery posts, etc., with the salary up front and center on there, some of the benefits coming through, just little things like that. I think just creates that sort of feel for the candidates of this is a progressive organization that's looking to really invest in the digital space, and I think just helps broaden the appeal, really. So little things like that just really help it as part of that jigsaw pieces to move us in the right direction.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. I can see Lauren's nodding frantically in the background there as well to agree. Do you want to chip in on that, Lauren? Do you want to come in and add anything?
Yeah, I was just saying, just to echo Chris's point, really, of getting your roles in front of, into channels where people are sort of actively looking for work, or even sort of passively looking for work as well. And we've compiled a list of like Slack channels that you can use to get your job advert out there, as well as like different LinkedIn groups, Twitter groups that you can use to just kind of share your role. And they're all compiled and put onto the Attract webinar blog post as well. It's just like a really, really effective way to proactively market your role, and it's so easy as well. If you just get a few senior leadership team members to like and share a post, then we've had successes in the past where people have seen those, applied, and are doing really great things within the organization. So yeah, it's just a really simple, effective way of advertising. It's cost effective as well.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I think I put something in the chat area along the lines of hearing from people who were hiring how they've almost had to defend their organization or sell how good the organization is. And I can see, the kind of phrases that Chris is using there about making the organization look appealing and modern and investing in, those are the kind of things that candidates will pick up on straight away. They can see that you've, made the effort to refresh job descriptions, and you've, made the effort of putting them first. So like Sheenagh was saying, it's almost a mindset change. Instead of expecting them to be grateful for, being offered the chance of finding a job on a website, it's almost like you're tailoring what you do and explaining why it's a benefit to them, and listing out those benefits in black and white, straight up front, being open and honest about it.
Definitely. And I think as well, something I touched upon was having those touch points with the candidates throughout. And as Sheenagh said, it is really competitive. Candidates are applying to multiple roles, they're interviewing with multiple organizations, and sort of keeping up to date with them where they're at in the sort of progression of these other applications as well. Being open and honest about the realities of the job offer that's going to come at the end of it. These are all things that, you can manage your process, you can manage their expectations, and it just means that when it comes to that sort of crucial offer stage, there are no surprises, and everybody's on the same page, and yeah, it just ensures consistency really, and make sure it goes over the line.
I'll just come in there, Pete, as well. That's great. There is a bit of a sense check with some of this, though, as well. Whilst, you know, obviously we've been really successful in recruiting to the posts we've advertised so far, as Sheenagh mentioned, we are anticipating there to be some challenges around some very specialist roles that we've got coming out at the moment. So specifically around developers and the more senior developers. So where we're going to have issues with those, what we're looking at is how we can, you know, essentially grow your own, bring them in at an entry-level developer role, invest in them through degree courses, etc., train them up with the hope that they will then stay with the organization, and we'll be able to move them through a career pathway into a more senior developer role. But I think the bottom line is in roles like that, you have to be realistic that the money that they can earn in, you know, private sector is going to be significantly more over time. So you are going to lose people in that way, but it's just about how you then have your pipeline set up to make sure that you are bringing people through, and as you say, growing your own in that space.
That's almost a perfect link for us to advertise next time's webinar, which is all about retention of staff. So thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, I think you're right. Some of those more difficult roles, specialist roles in particular, are really hard to get hold of. And then when you've got them, you invest and train them up, and then it's a pain to see them disappear off for better jobs. But I think, you know, from what I've been hearing, it's that whole pipeline idea that you can get benefit out of those people for as long as they're with you. And, you know, if you've got people following up behind that workforce planning sort of succession idea, then you're on the front foot all the time and you're ready to replace and keep things moving. Okay. Well, there's very quiet on the chat front. Not many questions at all have come in. I wanted to mention, as I speak, Dave's typed one up now, so thanks, Dave. This is best answered by Chris, I guess, or maybe Sheenagh, but how does progression work in NPT, and do staff have to apply for vacancies? So
at the moment, Dave, yeah, absolutely. So they do have to apply for vacancies. One of the things that I'm working on with Sheenagh and Sheenagh's team is around looking at how we can put in the career progression approach going forward. So effectively, if we bring somebody into an entry-level developer post, can we set a criteria that if they meet those criteria, we'll be able to move them through the ranks without having to go back through advert. So that is the next thing on the list for us to take this forward to the next sort of stage, really. What we don't want is that whole sort of dead person shoes, waiting for people to leave before they can progress and so on. So if we've got a head count, we want to operate within that head count and bring people through as they get to those sort of criteria that they pass.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a couple of quick things to mention. One of them is that our last webinar was accompanied by a blog post. We can find, I don't think it's appeared in the chat yet, but I can find that and share again because it links to the previous video of the webinar and all of the resources that Lauren shared. The slides from today's webinar will also be made available on CDPS website. And I'm pretty sure there's another blog post to accompany this. And we've got Lauren in the background. I think she's nodding, so that's great. Again, with more useful resources to accompany. And Chris has been kind enough to share with us the job descriptions and some of the advert wording and things like that that's been used. And as part of the role of the centre, playing on the word centre and working with lots of different sectors across Wales, we are looking to pull together a central location or a hub of job descriptions, model adverts, all the sort of resources that will be of use to people looking to do this kind of thing in your organisation. So that'll be available soon. And Lauren's confirmed, thank you, Lauren, that the blog post will be ready once the recording of today's session is actually finalised and attached. So that'll be useful. I'm not seeing any more questions unless Dave's going to chip in and get me just as I say that again now. But any final comments or questions from attendees, people who've arrived to watch and take part, would be appreciated now, or we'll call it a day very, very soon. It's already 5 to 1. Some very interesting comments. Thank you. That's good. Okay. Just preempting Dave typing frantically in the background. Many thanks to everybody for giving up some time again today. Lunchtime is a difficult time, especially this time of year, but really appreciate it. Many special thanks to Sheenagh, our special guest, and to Chris from Neath Talbot. Much appreciated, and thank you very much for being so open and honest and sharing everything that you went through. It's inspiring to see what can be done, so thank you very much. Big thank you to Lauren for all of her hard work, and the webinar team in the background. We've been putting things together. We've got people off sick and people have stepped in to help out today, so much appreciated, everybody. And we'll call it a day there. Thank you ever so much, all. Have a lovely Christmas, and we'll be back for the retention webinar in January.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Bye.
Thanks all.